Welcome back. The surge of money for the Technology Modernization Fund mean agencies will prioritize updates to legacy technology systems. Some experts say a national technology strategy is overdue to coordinate tech and innovation. Ainikki Riikonen is a research assistant in the Technology and National Security Program at the Center for a New American Security. She and her colleagues are writing about the possibility of such a strategy. Ainikki, welcome. Thanks for coming on the program. What is the current state of such a strategy for technology and innovation? Is there even such a thing?
It seems to be a work in progress, and I'm happy to say it seems to be a matter of bipartisan interest. In October, we had the Trump administration come out with a national strategy for critical and emerging technologies. Unfortunately, it was a little light on details. In January, then President-elect Biden wrote to his science advisor nominee to request that he establish some general strategies, specific actions, and new structures that the federal government can implement in pursuit of a national technology strategy. And so while we haven't seen a very substantive one materialize, I'm happy to see that it seems to be very much in motion. Many
recommendations that you and your colleagues make, and they fit into a couple of categories. The first category is strategy development. Where are the greatest shortfalls, the greatest needs in strategy development, Ainikki?
Yes, so far, I think when we look at what does it mean for the United States to compete internationally, we've very much taken an ad hoc approach so far in the past couple of years, seeing sort of ad hoc export controls, trying to ban certain companies, all under this umbrella of this emerging recognition that national security, economic prosperity, and science and technology are very closely intertwined. And so in terms of development of a strategy, some things that we would really love to see is actually appointment of a deputy national security advisor that's dedicated to this, someone who can speak with the Office of Science and Technology Policy, the National Economic Council, and the National Security Council to kind of deconflict these three different interests and do a really thorough inventory of what tools are available, how do we deconflict their use, and how do we maximize the use of all of them?
I was looking at one of the recommendations in this area in particular because I love the turn of phrase, exercise realistic responsibility. And you and your colleagues write strategy drafters should closely audit and support implementation plans and rather than leaving them to the agency's own devices. How did you come about that term? Because I think that's an interesting way of putting it, Ainikki.
Absolutely. I think one of the challenges in government is, obviously we have a lot of talented people, but with this comes a lot of inertia as well. And historically, some of the cultural inertia is an aversion or, severe allergy to this idea of industrial policy. And so because we're sort of advocating for a cultural shift and the use of tools to new purposes, we felt it would probably be helpful to have that top-down guidance that says, here's exactly what we're trying to do, and here's how you can help us do it.
The second bucket of recommendations is strategy implementation. Where do you think there is potential there for either great success or challenges?
I think some of the challenges will be in talent acquisition, getting the right people in government. Uniquely, technology is really driven by the private sector, and so we do need that expertise. Because we're looking at economic prosperity, national security, and science and technology, we also need people who have very interdisciplinary backgrounds. And so how do you cultivate that interagency, collaboration in a way that's coherent? I think those are some of the biggest challenges that I see.
The third bucket that you and your colleagues write about is strategy monitoring and evaluation. I note there's really only one recommendation that you make in that area, Ainikki.
Yes, and our recommendation is that there needs to be some framework that's repeatable and transparent. Obviously, we live in a democracy, which means the input of the American people is immensely important. In the past few years, amongst a couple of different government agencies, we've seen some random top 10 lists of priority technologies, not always fully fleshed out why they're important or how they're being pursued. And also, given that technological development happens on such a quick scale, we really recommend that the administration, keep coming back to the strategy, to the technology areas they're looking at, and keep reconsidering, how is this changing and how do we need to adapt and how do we need to then address emerging trends we see on the horizon.
What gets at that repeatability issue that you write about there? Because that strikes me as the one that potentially has been difficult for the federal government as a whole and agencies in particular in the past.
Right. I think a lot of what's been happening is improvising when thinking about, how do we deal with technology competition? And so I think having some framework that agencies and the executive can return to is important to have, that kind of guiding pathway, and also to have a common set of criteria to do their assessments in. Certainly this issue is not going away anytime soon. And so while it's an emerging issue, I think this is something we're going to have to really get down in the coming years.
You and your colleagues wrap this up by writing, the United States has in recent years found a rare moment of bipartisan agreement about this problem. And you addressed that at the beginning of this conversation. How to capitalize on that, I suppose, is the question at this point, right, Ainikki?
Right. I think we can capitalize on momentum. For better or worse, the United States is entering, what a lot of people have been calling great power competition. And while in some ways I think it's a shame that we need to identify an adversary to get ourselves together, I think the positive thing that can come out of it is that it gives us an area across both parties to really focus on and think about what are the hazards, who as a country we want to be domestically and internationally, especially given the giant impact of technology on, our day-to-day lives, governance, for not just ourselves, but people around the world.
Ainikki Riikonen, thanks very much for joining me. It's great to have you on the program.
Thank you so much.